Hello and welcome to Tabletop 24. I'm Alan.
I'm John.
I'm Brian.
And welcome to another episode of We'll Play a Game, where we take a look at games we've recently got to the table with a view of how quickly we get them back to the table. With ever-growing collections, time can be precious, so we ask the question, will we play a game? Today we have Bot Factory from Eagle Griffin Games. In Bot Factory, we are going to be playing competing co-workers aiming to make the best and the most robots that we can in the factory limits that we have. Each turn is going, each round is going to be broken down into 3 phases. The first phase is going to be our worker placement phase, whereby typically on a normal round, we would start left to right, and whoever had the furthest to the left would then get to place and keep going round like that. But in the first round, we would then get to play a worker straight to the board. So, for instance, I will place mine on there, and these guys would then place theirs. Sandra would also move, but for the first round, she's a bit tired for the start of the shift. She's having a bit of a lay down to start off with. She will then come about in the next round. If you want to place your worker in the place that Sandra does end up, and when we get to the action phase, you would have to pay Sandra a speech token in order to do work in that area. You kind of have to just sign off everything through Sandra. Then we get to the action phase, and each of these boards works slightly different. You will get your main action, and you get the option of an executive action. On the assembly board, the main action is going to be taking a number of placement actions depicted on the board. If you was in this right spot, you would need to pay a speech mark to do that. But you're going to be getting a lot more speech marks when you do that. So for instance here, I would take my one part that we got at the beginning of the game, and I'm going to place it on here. Placing a part gives us a number of speech marks. So if it's the first part, you get 2 ones. If it's the second part, you get 2 speech marks. If it's the third part, you don't get any speech marks, but you do get the robot to put on a contract or a project tile that you've got that you can fulfill. So I would take my 2 speech marks, but as you noticed, I covered up a bit of a bonus icon. This bonus icon allows me to spend a speech mark, which I do from the 2 that I've just gained, to gain a part from the top of any one of these tiles, which you'll see I'm going to take this one. Now, because I've got 2 actions over here, I can place my second tile straight on there, getting me 2 more speech marks. So you can start to see already where the game's going to be going. You're going to be trying to chain these things together. Alternatively, I could take my executive action, or instead of, or as well as, and spend speech marks to swap any parts that I've got for the parts that are available here. So in an ideal world, I'd have had another part here, and I could have swapped it for that green head, and I'm well on my way then to getting me a green robot. Second board is where we're going to gain our parts. So John's on the 1 to 4. What I should say as well is, once you're doing actions, you're a bit tired, so you have a bit of a lay down. John's on his 1 to 4. He gets 4 movement actions on this board. Now, a movement action is either take a part, rotate the board 90 degrees, and you can keep going around, and you can keep taking and doing from there. If you then get to an empty space, you could then put in any part of your choice. So I'm going to guess here, I'm going to speak for him, John is going to put a yellow part on the board because he's aiming to try and build that yellow robot. Now he gets these parts. Now, when he took the parts from the selection here that has the bonus icon on, you can spend a speech mark to then be able to assemble. Now, it doesn't even need to be these parts. So again, you start to see quite quickly how you can then start chaining these things together. So he'd take those pieces, he could then spend 1 to place one of those bits on a board, which then gets him the 2 speech marks, which he could then spend 1 to get another piece off of that. So again, really starting to change those up. Your executive action, which is at the top here, would allow you to spend 3 parts to gain any part of your choice from one of the top of the piles. John's tired. He's having a little bit of a lay down now. Coming on to Brian. Brian's on the contract board, the project board, which enables him to then gain any projectile that he sees available up here. If he was to gain one of these ones at the bottom, he could either gain a speech mark, or he could spend 1 to assemble a part that he has in his fold. So the main part of why you're going to need these projectiles is that without a projectile, you cannot complete a robot. So, for instance, if Brian had a green head, he couldn't place this green head on the board because he only has a yellow projectile. So he might now want to have taken a green projectile if we had one out to enable him to get there before I do. Because even though I played those parts, it's not mine until I place that last part to get it. Alternatively, as an executive action, he could then spend 2 projectiles to gain one of these universal tiles. They can be used in any bot colour. They are limited, there's only 2 of each type. Once they've been used, they will be coming back to this board. Lay Brian down, he'll have a bit of a nap. Lastly, we get on to the contracts board and the finance board, the back office, if you will. Now, we've not played anybody here, so we'll use Sandra as an example. She will do a bit of a different action, but let's say she was our 4th player, and she was over here in our 4th spot. Here, we are spending those valuable speech marks to do actions. We can spend 1 to push up any colour, price of any colour bot, and if we were to break the line here, we would get either an additional project or be able to assemble a part tile if we go across that next one. And you can spend as many speech marks as you have got available to do as part of the action that you've selected. So here we could spend up to 4. So for instance, we could spend 2 there. We'd have to spend them back to the supply. If we increase the price there of the blue robot, we would enable us to gain a projectile and also then place a part tile on the assembly board. And again, you can start to see here that taking the projectile to gain a speech mark, to place it on there, to then spend the speech mark to gain a new point, you're starting to really combo these things up. Lastly is going to be the point where you get the most of your points from in the game. You will need to spend either 1, 2, or 3 speech marks. Now, we couldn't spend 3 speech marks because we've already spent 2, increasing the price over here. So we would spend 2 speech marks to place one of our speech mark tokens on the left-hand side of one of these contracts. Now, for argument's sake, let's say I place mine on there. I've not got a blue robot yet. I'm banking on the fact that I'm going to get one later in the game. If I was then to get a blue robot later in the game and I assigned it to that contract at the end of the game, which we'll cover in a second, I would then get 2 points plus 5 points for the row that it's on. So whilst these have been randomly set up, and we could have easily have had that blue robot up here, he would then have got 9 points. Or down here, it would have only been worth 4 points. So you're spending those speech marks to claim the contracts that will be worth more points at the end for you. Now, Sandra herself will be walking around and going around into each of these boards. And she will be moving from board to board and doing slightly different actions. On our assembly board, she will be swiping off these 2 palleted items and bringing in 2 more from the stacks you see here. Similarly on here, she will then also be refilling this board based on where the token is, the distribution token. Every time we place one, we would then move the distribution token along one until such point there's all the boards is filled, and then that just stays there until she moves back to that on another occasion. On the project board, she would swipe the bottom 2 of these and push these down and replenish at the top. It's going to be quite handy if you want to see a bit of a fresh icon and be the first one there to see it. Or on the finance board, she will push up the price of the lowest valued robot. Now, if that was here, nothing would move. But as we had everything here, we would actually move the price of all 3 of these up 1. Alternatively, if it was just the red one that was behind, the red one would get pushed up. So it's sort of a catch-up mechanic for the bots that are not very popular, sort of maybe diversifying what you're building towards the end of the game. So we will keep going then until we've got either 5, the first person gets the 5 bots, or all of the bots have gone. The only thing we haven't covered, obviously, is the maintenance phase, which was phase 3. And in the maintenance phase, we would then swipe any completed bot. So, for instance, let's say this was already placed. We would swipe him to his... He wouldn't be there. He'd be off the board. So the discard above the stack for him. And we would then reduce his price by 1. We would then swipe these, pull these down, and replenish. So we're constantly replenishing these projectiles in order for us to get access to more projects. Like I say, then we keep going until either we get the 5 bots or we've completed 4 of the same ones. At that point, we trigger the end of the game at the end of that maintenance phase. And you'll get points in a variety of different ways. And you can also lose some points. First way you're going to get points is by completed bots and their price, okay, or value. So in this instance, blue bots will be worth 10, green would only be worth 6. We would then assign our bots based on the contracts where we've already assigned a marker. So in this example, a really poor example, we've only got one contract being sort of assigned, which is me with my blue bot. If I had a blue bot, I'd assign him to that. I would then score my 7 points, and everybody else would score the same for the ones that they've claimed. If Brian had come along and he'd also put on there on his 1, we could both assign a blue bot to that. I would get the 6 points, Brian would get. I would get the 7 points, Brian would get the 6 points. And we would keep going from that. We can then gain a point for every 2 pairs of speech marks that we've got. We will then lose points for contracts we've not fulfilled. In this example, if I hadn't fulfilled this contract, I would lose 2 points because that's where I've claimed and that's where I've staked I've got it. You wouldn't consider the points on the side of the board, just the points on the contract that you've picked up. You will then lose 2 points for every uncompleted project, and you'll also lose a point for every unused tile. It's really making sure that you've got that efficiency down. With all that being said, the person with the most points would then win and be the most successful bot maker.
So this game is kind of my first Lacerda game. We saw its bigger brother, its spiritual, the extended version of Kanban being played at Aircon. And it looked like a very large, complex beast. I like the simplicity in this. And in essence, it's an efficiency puzzle. How quickly can you chain up items to be able to get more actions, to be able to do more things, to get more things, to do more things? And I quite like that about this. I enjoyed playing it.
Yeah, and when we say it's my first Lacerda, it's actually my first Lacerda that I've played. Lacerda games have always been attractive to me because of the complexity of them, but these are games that take a good number of hours to learn, possibly an hour to teach.
And you've got to be committed to be sitting there and play. And
don't get me wrong, they're great games, but they are a commitment to it. And I think they come in these big boxes with lots of components, and it can be a little bit daunting to some people. And in your average game night, you're not going to get in a Lacerda game. Most groups are.
I think we played 2 or 3 games while the table next to us had finished their game of Kanban. It was that kind of length.
Yeah, well, I'd learned and taught and played a game by the time they'd finished their teach.
Yeah.
And that says the type of, but that is the type of game it is. And I think there's very much a cult following for these type of games, and I think it's very, very well earned. But when we say this is my first Lacerda, it's because the time frame rolls back. Our average time to play this is about 75 minutes, which for what I would class as a heavy game in its decision making and stuff like that, is actually quite a short amount of time. And I think the big thing about this is how does it scale back? And I think a lot of the ideas from Kanban are there. Again, we've not played Kanban, but we've seen it a few times and know of it, and it's been one that I've been wanting to try. So I can see where the spiritual successor comes from. But I think this definitely sings a little bit to those people that might not have been able to get the cert to the table for that sort of time frame or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I quite like the theme of it, in the sense not so much that you're making bots particularly, but the fact that you feel like you're coming in the middle of a beginning of a shift. So you're not kind of build a factory. You're just turning up for your shift in the middle of things that are already happening, and then going through it. And you could imagine this could be reskinned to making anything really, cars or telescopes or anything. It's quite interesting the way that the play works. To sort of does fit that factory theme and getting the things out at the time. And
I think the theme sort of flows. The idea of that efficiency, that mechanics of building something, very much bots a factory. A factory doesn't have to be bot factory; it could just be factory.
Yes.
Biscuits.
Yeah. I think anybody that has played Kanban or knows of Kanban, they will recognise Sandra. Sandra's followed around from other games. A really interesting mechanic, whereby Sandra's looking to evaluate you, and so you have to talk to her if you go to the same spot as her. It almost seems like you were avoiding her.
Costs you a speech bubble to be in the same board as her, doesn't it?
Yeah, so it's kind of affecting your game, slowing you down slightly. But it might be that's where you've got to go. She obviously does some real important things of refreshing certain parts of the game. So really pushing everybody along. So it really adds that mix and also takes up a space. So obviously we've got this set up for 3. If you had this set up for 4, you've got 11 spots. That's 5 spots that are instantly taken if you're playing 4 games. So it makes the game out a little bit tighter and a little bit harder to work in. And I think in the 2-player game, you can't even go to the board that Sandra's on. So it really tightens down where you can and can't go.
It pushes that decision making. No, doesn't it? Where are you going to go? What are you going to do?
Yeah, some of the mechanics of the game. So obviously you play left to right. So it's a benefit of you going first sometimes on the board to get what you need to get, but you get fewer actions essentially. But the further left you are, so although you might want to go here to get up to 6 points, it might be that by the time someone's had their 2 goes, nothing's on the board for you.
I might want to come in here because I want to nab these bits that John might want.
So I think, and that kind of area control aspect of the game sometimes works against you. So you've got to plan ahead a little bit as to what you want to do. Because by the time you're around, it might be that you've got to rethink.
Yeah, and with that, you've really got to focus on what everybody else is doing.
Yeah,
you've got to kind of have one eye on what bots they want because they may end up coming for something that you're after, and it's not from an aggression point of view of I'm going to take that so you can't have it, but it's almost from a defense point of view.
Yeah,
I need to be aware of what you want so that you don't take it from me.
And the fact you mentioned that the bots aren't yours until they're yours.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
you can gazump somebody who's been working hard to get that yellow robot made, coming to get it off them, and that happened to you as well. So
you sort of a bit of almost holding back to you can feel that to grab it rather than sitting there for a round watching other people.
Utilising those extra spaces there to get more points to build the robot. And it chain those actions together.
And it doesn't even have to be that you're on that location to do that. So you could come here, take this, play a part over here that just takes it away from somebody.
It does lend itself to the kind of player that can think that way.
Yeah.
And if you're not that kind of player, you probably struggle with this game.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're not keeping your focus on what, or just looking at what other games gamers are doing, it can really quickly for you, and you can be left holding stuff that's going to give you minus points, and you're not fulfilling the contract. So you really got to stay looking at what other people are doing.
What was really interesting in our last game was there was that crescendo, wasn't there? Mm-hmm. Everybody seemed to have got. I think you were like 2 or 3 bots behind going into that last.
Yeah, I got lucky on the
straight 5,
and I managed to get all 5 robots built and the best contracts. So I kind of lucked out actually on that last.
Yeah, engineered, right?
Engineered,
built ahead, manufactured.
Yeah.
I think this all then comes down to where this sits for everybody.
Is it too light for really heavy gamers, and is it too heavy for people who prefer medium sort of games?
Yeah. I would definitely put this on the heaviest side of medium, and that sounds really political.
But it's on the lighter side of heavy.
Yeah, but it's a really sort of, for anybody that wants that Lacerda crunch and wants that brain burn to a degree, they're going to find that here if they want it.
Yes.
But for somebody that just wants to put workers down and build something cool, they can do that as well.
Yeah,
and I think. What group of, I don't know, we've said this about a lot of games, but what group of people you play this with is really going to depend what experience you get. The group that we played with, when we played this as a 4, it was not cutthroat, but it was very competitive. So we all knew that we needed to maximise our turns.
Yes.
But I could quite easily see us play this with different people and be just like, I'm just going to place this here, I'm going to go here and have a much more open experience. And I think for that, you're able to do that and still have something fulfilling.
Yeah, I'm not sure what your scores would be at the end.
No. But I think you still have something that's that little bit more fulfilling. And you can have different strategies. You can force the end of the game. You can elongate everybody's choices. You could really...
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
really mess with it.
You can spend more time here pushing the price up instead of building.
Yeah, it's finely honed. There doesn't seem to be an an ounce of wasted anything on this. Every decision leads to something else, and everything has got a counterpoint and an alternate thing.
And also, you can't always do what you want, but there's always something else you can do.
Yeah.
So it's plan B.
Yeah.
Okay, you've got to have that in mind as well. If I want to go there, but if that's taken by the time my round comes to me, I'll have to do this instead.
Yeah. And almost always having some extra speech mark tokens on hand in case you have to go where Sandra is, or you have to take the spot, or you have to come over here to push a price.
Sometimes I found that you have to almost like take a not quite a dead round, but a round just to get more speech marks if you didn't need any parts.
Yeah.
And there's a limit how many parts you can have in your hand, so sometimes that kind of stops you as well.
Yeah.
So, John, with all that being said, would you play again?
I would play it again. I don't think it's a bad game in any way, shape, or form. There's a lot to be said for this game, and it scratches that quite heavy itch for me. But would I play it over Terraforming Mars or Ark Nova or something else? I think I'd towards these. The one winner for me for this is the time that it takes. It's quite a short game. For the weight, it's short, and there's not a lot of heavy short games about.
We could quite easily get this 2 of these games of this in a session for us.
Yeah. So I like this game. I enjoyed playing it, but I don't know that I'd rush to play it again, weirdly. So I hesitate for me. It's just a bit too thinky, but not quite thinky enough, and there's too much ways that my game can be blocked by other people that just brings that enjoyment back for me a little bit, I think. So...
For me, we'll play again. I like this. Like I say, I've always wanted to play a certain game, and I think this is very much an entry into that and into that way of thinking. And for me, it isn't going to be the game that I go and choose to get off the shelf all the time. But when I want that little bit something else, that little bit more brain burn, then I think this would be the one that I pulled off the shelf.
Yeah. Okay. Beware Sandra, she's a bitch.
With all that being said, thank you for watching along with this episode of We'll Play Again. If you haven't done so already, please check out other videos on the channel, give us a like and a subscribe, and we'll catch you next time. Take care.
Bye-bye.